The Roman Empire represented power and stability for centuries. Whoever commanded that empire enjoyed a position of privilege and power almost unrivaled throughout history. But being emperor didn't guarantee you'd stay emperor. Throughout its history, many of Rome's emperors met gruesome deaths that turned the office into a dangerous gamble. From public lynchings to being skinned alive, these are the worst ways that Roman emperors died. We begin with the shortest reigning emperor on our list, Vitellius. Vitellius had never been a popular man. Some sources tell us he'd been a lover of the emperor Tiberius as a boy, and then he grew up to be a close friend of both Caligula and Nero, none of whom were particularly popular emperors themselves. He allegedly ordered his own son's execution so he could steal his inheritance, but still refused to pay his debts. Perhaps his only positive character trait was that he was good to the men under his command, and that was enough to bring him to the throne. In 69 AD, the Emperor Galba was assassinated, leading to a power struggle. With his armies at his back, Vitellius killed his rival Otho and seized power in Rome for himself. It would not be a pleasant reign. His reign was marked by extravagance and immorality. He spent his time feasting and partying with actors and prostitutes instead of governing the empire. Unsurprisingly, for a man who killed his own son, he was cruel and fond of torturing or assassinating anyone who bothered him. Even his mother wasn't safe. According to the historian Suetonius, an astrologer promised Vitellius a long reign, so as long as he outlived his mother. Depending on which source you read, he either had her starved to death or poisoned soon after to force the prophecy to come true. It only took a few months for rebellion to break out. The Egyptian legions proclaimed Vespasian the true emperor, and troops from multiple provinces flocked to his banner. Vespasian also had allies in Rome itself, specifically his brother the prefect Sabinus, who rallied Vespasian's supporters against Vitellius. Vitellius quickly realized that Vespasian had much more support overall and publicly declared his intention to abdicate. However, he made the announcement to a crowd of his supporters, and when they begged him to stay, he interpreted their support as proof that the people were actually loyal to him. He changed his mind and ordered his remaining soldiers to attack Vespasian's supporters in the city. Hundreds of Vespasian's loyalists, including his brother Sabinus, were killed. Many of them burned alive inside the Temple of Jupiter. It was a fatal mistake. Vespasian's legions marched on Rome, and he would spare no mercy for the man who murdered his brother. Those who didn't abandon Vitellius were slaughtered as Vespasian's men took the city. Vitellius fled to his palace, finding it completely abandoned, even by the servants. Totally alone, the desperate emperor barricaded himself in the dog kennels. But according to Cassius Dio, the hungry beasts began to attack him. Fortunately or unfortunately, Vespasian's troops found him before the dogs could kill him. They tied the frightened and wounded emperor's hands together, threw a noose around his neck, and dragged him through the streets. The soldiers and citizens of Rome all turned out to heckle him, spitting on him and throwing racks and feces at their former emperor. His clothes were torn off and he was left naked as they paraded him through the streets. Vitellius was taken to the Gemonian stairs, where he was strung up for torture in front of the cheering crowd. The soldiers cut him hundreds of times across his body to ensure he died in agony. When they were done, they chopped off his head and tossed his body into the Tiber River. Vitellius went down as one of the shortest-lived and most despised emperors in Roman history. Vitellius's end was grim, but at least it came at the hands of people who were openly his enemies. This wasn't something that could be said for our next emperor, Commodus. Commodus is one of the most infamous Roman emperors, and for good reason. By all accounts, he was sadistic, arrogant, and vengeful. Inheriting the throne at just 19 years old, Commodus was more interested in gladiatorial games than ruling an empire. He made frequent appearances in the gladiatorial arena despite this being considered shameful by Roman society. He slew animals and even other people in front of cheering crowds, which gave him a public reputation for being violent. He lived up to this reputation in politics too, ordering the deaths of multiple officials, senators, and other figures who stood in his way. During his 12 years on the throne, he survived multiple assassination plots, which only made him more cruel and more paranoid. All of these factors came together to give him a violent end. In December 192 AD, Commodus was making preparations for the New Year festival in Rome. However, instead of making a typical imperial appearance at the ceremonies, Commodus decided he wanted to appear with the gladiators instead. As we mentioned, gladiators were not held in high regard in Rome. For an emperor to make an official appearance with them was unthinkable. This is exactly what Commodus was told by three important people: his mistress Marcia, his chamberlain Eclectus, and a prefect named Laetus. Reportedly, all three people told the emperor this was a terrible idea and warned him against it. Naturally, Commodus didn't take their answers well. He angrily withdrew to his quarters and drew up a list of people to be executed in the new year. At the top of that list were Marcia, Eclectus, and Laetus. But Commodus made the mistake of leaving the kill list in his quarters after he left, where Marcia found it, and she was furious. "So, Commodus, this is my reward for my love and devotion after I have put up with your arrogance and your madness for so many years?" Marcia sent for Eclectus and Laetus and warned them of Commodus's plan to execute them. All three agreed that they needed to get rid of Commodus first. When Commodus returned later that day, Marcia acted like everything was fine, giving no sign that she was about to poison him. Herodian says the poison was given in wine, while Cassius Dio says it was Commodus's beef that she poisoned. Either way, Marcia made sure the emperor consumed that fatal poison before excusing herself. That emperor soon began to feel drowsy. Then his stomach began to ache. Soon he was painfully vomiting as the poison ravaged him. It would have been agony, but it was actually saving his life. All that vomiting was expelling the poison from his system. After a short while, the vomiting seemed to slow down and Commodus began feeling better. So he headed over to his private bath to clean up. Marcia, Eclectus, and Laetus realized the poison had failed, so they called in more help. They summoned the wrestler Narcissus, one of Commodus's favorite lovers, and ordered him to finish the emperor before he could fully recover. Narcissus slipped into his master's quarters and strangled the emperor to death in the bath. Commodus died as he lived, violently and hated by just about everyone. But there are even more embarrassing situations to be assassinated than taking a bath, as the Emperor Caracalla would find out. Caracalla was not like Commodus. He had a reputation for cruelty and pettiness that made it dangerous to be anywhere near him. One of the first people to realize this was probably his brother Geta, who was supposed to be co-emperor but was mysteriously murdered, leaving all the power to Caracalla. While Commodus's great obsession was gladiator combat, Caracalla's was Alexander the Great. He wanted to emulate the famous conqueror and shifted his attention to the east where Alexander had once roamed. In one famous incident, he visited the city of Alexandria, where he met a group of Aristotelian philosophers. Aristotle was Alexander's tutor, and there was a popular theory at the time that Aristotle had actually poisoned Alexander after he executed one of Aristotle's friends. Caracalla decided to take revenge by ordering the Aristotelian philosophers to be executed en masse. It's no surprise that Caracalla became quite unpopular. Even his own guards came to fear him, including one Marcus Opellius Macrinus. Macrinus was a prefect in Caracalla's Praetorian Guard and joined the emperor when he decided to emulate Alexander by conquering Persia in 216. Shortly after arriving in Asia, though, word came that a soothsayer had predicted that Caracalla would fall and be replaced by Macrinus. Rumors like this were totally baseless, but if Caracalla heard them, he'd surely have Macrinus executed just to be safe. Echoing Commodus's assassination, Macrinus decided to kill the emperor first, before the emperor killed him. Macrinus recruited another guard named Justine Martialis to join him. Sources don't agree why Martialis was chosen. Some say Caracalla had executed his brother, others that he was angry at Caracalla for not giving him a promotion. Either way, Caracalla had made an enemy of him, and Martialis was apparently happy to join the conspiracy. On April 8, 217, Caracalla went to visit a temple outside Edessa with a small contingent of his personal guard, including Macrinus and Martialis. Along the way, the emperor stopped by the side of the road to relieve himself. Then, while Caracalla was doing his business, Martialis snuck up behind him and stabbed him to death. One of Caracalla's other guards supposedly saw the attack and rushed in, killing Martialis, but Caracalla's wounds were fatal. Macrinus returned to camp with the two bodies, claiming Martialis alone was behind the assassination. Macrinus then declared himself emperor, which only made him look more suspicious. Caracalla would be avenged 14 months later, but even Macrinus's execution could never erase the brutal embarrassment of being murdered by his own guards while going to the toilet. All of the emperors we've discussed so far were killed by their own people. However, it could get even worse when emperors fell at the hands of their enemies. In 260 AD, the Roman Empire was gripped in the crisis of the 3rd century. Beset by multiple enemies and internal strife, the short-lived emperors of the day spent most of their time trying to keep the fracturing empire together or suppressing those pesky Christians who kept popping up across the empire. This included Emperor Valerian. While his co-emperor Gallienus managed things in the west, Valerian followed in Caracalla's footsteps by setting out for the east to deal with Rome's greatest enemy, Persia. Valerian took his army into Anatolia, where he expected the Persian emperor Shapur to launch an attack on the city of Edessa. However, while he waited, plague struck the army and decimated its ranks. By the time Shapur's army arrived, Valerian's army was severely weakened. They fought anyway and lost. The entire army was killed or captured, including Valerian. It was the first time that a Roman emperor was captured by the enemy. Shapur was thrilled with this new prisoner and treated Emperor Valerian like a trophy. He kept him close by and frequently humiliated the emperor whenever he could, such as by using Valerian as a footstool to climb onto his horse. This was bad enough for Valerian, but Rome had a long-standing policy of never ransoming captured soldiers. The idea was that if you started ransoming prisoners, then soldiers were more likely to surrender than fight to the death. This policy apparently extended to emperors. Valerian's co-emperor Gallienus never even attempted to free him from captivity. This was even worse when you consider that Gallienus was also Valerian's son. Gallienus left his father to rot in Persian captivity for years. There he was tortured and humiliated until Shapur decided to finish him off. Valerian supposedly was strung up in public and flayed alive for all to see. His skin was dipped in vermilion and deposited in a nearby temple as a trophy. The writer Zosimus called it the greatest shame to the name of the Romans for future generations. We should say that this story is up for debate. The source for his flaying is a later Christian writer who despised Valerian for his aggressive persecution of Christians, and modern scholars suspect Valerian's fate may have been embellished by a writer who wanted to make an example of him. Details may be up for discussion, but Valerian was still abandoned by his son to die as slave in a foreign land. Now, every emperor we've covered had flaws that may have justified their grim fate, but this last emperor's death is notable because by all accounts he was a good person and a good ruler. That was Emperor Joannes. By the 5th century AD, Rome was obviously on the decline. The empire had been split between East and West, with the Eastern emperor at Constantinople definitely being the stronger of the two. Still, the position of the Western emperor was a powerful one. Plenty of people wanted. This included Joannes, who served as a chief secretary to the Western emperor, Honorius. Honorius was a pretty terrible ruler, and few people shed a tear when he died in 423. But with no heirs to take Honorius's place, Joannes was able to use his powerful office to secure the title of emperor for himself. Sources agree that Joannes wasn't a bad emperor. His years of work as Honorius's chief secretary made him a capable ruler who knew how to rule an empire. According to the historian Procopius, he neither gave ear to slanderers, nor did he do any unjust murder, nor did he set his hand to robbing men of money. The only mark against his character was that he struggled to deal with the barbarian threats and, according to his enemies, took the throne from its real heir. The Eastern Emperor Theodosius considered Joannes to be a usurper. Honorius had initially ruled alongside a man named Constantius, but Constantius died shortly after the appointment, and the position of Western co-emperor was supposed to be reserved for his infant son Valentinian. Theodosius wanted Valentinian on the throne in the West and refused to accept Joannes as legitimate. It's not clear whether Joannes was even aware of this plan, and even if he was, Valentinian was 4 years old and could not rule the Western Empire anytime soon. In late 424, Theodosius's army arrived in Italy to depose Joannes and raise the young Valentinian to the imperial purple anyway. Joannes tried the unthinkable and sent a messenger to the Huns to seek aid, but it was too late. Theodosius's army besieged and captured Joannes in Ravenna in early 425. He would not be treated kindly. The usurper emperor was taken to the city of Aquileia, where they cut off his hands and brought him to the hippodrome for the jeering crowds to see. The mutilated emperor was then strapped to a donkey and paraded around the racetrack so the crowds could mock and throw things at him. This man, who had apparently ruled well and never committed abuse against his people, was treated like a hated spectacle. Joannes was then taken away and beheaded, the final punishment for traitors. Clearly, you didn't have to be a bad emperor or even a bad man to end up humiliated, tortured, and executed in public by the people you once ruled over. Whether they were lynched by a mob, poisoned and strangled by their lovers, stabbed by their guards while urinating, flayed alive by their enemies, or mutilated as a public spectacle, Roman emperors saw their fair share of brutal ends. They may have pretended to be gods among men, but in the end, they were all as mortal as anyone else.